Hey, this is Rick Caselge from exercisesforinjuries.com. Today I have another interview for you, and it's with Sue, and we're going to talk about how she foam rolls but doesn't really roll with the foam roller. Now, more specifically, what we're going to kind of talk about is like healing your own chronic pain, because both myself and Sue are really big into like self-care, and probably the best person to help you recover from injury or heal yourself is actually yourself, and compared to anyone else. And we'll expand more on that. But first I'll get Sue to introduce herself, and then we'll get into the interview.
Okay. So I'm Sue Hitzmann. I'm the creator of the Melt Method, and I'm a hands-on body worker based out of New York City. And I developed Melt as a way to empower my clients to get out of my office and get back into their active lifestyles by teaching them how to restore fascial hydration, connective tissue hydration, and try to get their body out of a state of imbalance by educating them about what stress does in a body to cause it to not heal as all bodies should.
Awesome. And then so maybe we'll kind of step back and we'll kind of talk about, how big of a problem is chronic pain. I know you're in the US and you could probably speak more specifically when it comes to that, but
Sure.
the stats are almost like identical in Canada. But maybe you can kind of talk about how big of a problem chronic pain is, and maybe like what the definition of chronic pain is.
Yeah, those are two great things. So in the U.S., our statistics are that 100 million people suffer from chronic pain in the U.S. alone. And I actually think that number is low, because when they do statistics, those are people who actually go to a doctor to complain about their chronic pain. But what I can tell you is a lot of people, when you talk to them, sometimes they don't call it pain, and so they don't do anything about it. In fact, I would honestly tell you, Rick, there are often times where I think people think that pain is normal because it's so common. And I say, no, see, that's it. Is science defines what normal is, and normal is a reference point for ideal. What you're talking about is called average, and average is actually below normal if you talk to science.
Yes.
So we're all sorts of in pain. So, and the biggest thing that's occurred over I think, really probably since pharmaceuticals have really taken over how people deal with pain, is the difference in the understanding that there are different types of pain. And I always say, people can get into pain for a lot of reasons. You can get an accident, illness, injuries. I always say even heartbreak and the flu can cause your body to send you pain symptoms. But the beauty of the human body is it does have this amazing propensity to heal itself. We know that it does. You cut yourself, after a while, you scar over and the cut is gone. But there's a big gap, a big gray area in how we treat the broad spectrum of pain. So pain to me goes into a wide array from acute trauma to chronic pain. And acute trauma, we all know, you fall down a flight of stairs, somebody punches you in the face, you get hit by a bus, those are things where you can go to a doctor, you know exactly when it happened, exactly what happened. You can tell the doctor the exact instance that you had the problem. They're going to go through their whole, protocol, check you x-rays, MRIs, whatever they need, and then they're going to treat you for the chronic issues. So when you have a chronic instance, in fact, pain relievers and pain inhibitors are oftentimes the very best things. Anti-inflammatories are the very best thing that you can do, because it helps the nervous system at an acute state to not overstress your body so much that your hormones get all out of balance and all of these things start happening. Your body produces too many chemicals and it can actually work against itself. So in that instance, pain meds, anti-inflammatories, those are great things. But the bigger problem is that there is this gray area that I call the area of sudden chronic pain. And that's the kind of pain that it comes on with the same vestige, it comes on with the same type of feeling, but it was in no way an acute trauma. You bent over to pick up a pencil and your back goes out. Or you do the same yoga pose that you've done 10,000 times, only this time your hamstring rips. And people say, I know exactly when it happened. I know exactly what caused it. But I say to them, yeah, but that's not the cause of your pain. That was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. What you're not realizing is that repetition in your daily life accumulated what I call stuck stress in your tissues. And, when you have sudden chronic pain, the issue is in your connective tissue. It's not in your mind. It wasn't a trauma. It's happening suddenly, yes, but it was caused by history. And the biggest issue with that is that if you go to a doctor, you can tell them exactly what happened and exactly the problem, and they're going to unfortunately treat you like it's an acute trauma, and it isn't. And you're down that road of disorganizing your nervous system, how your body adapts to stress, how your body manages and deals with pain symptoms. And over time, either acute or sudden chronic pain can ultimately become chronic pain. And chronic pain is usually defined as any pain that is either reoccurring more than 4 times in a year, or a pain that is sustained for over 6 weeks at a constant state or a constant level. That's what chronic pain is.
And it's amazing to think that 100 million people in the U.S. suffer from, chronic pain, period.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and again, worldwide it's over 300 million. So we actually are like a third of the problem is just in the U.S. But the other thing is, again, a lot of people don't call it pain. Like even migraines to me are a pain symptom, digestive problems, sleep issues, gut issues. These cause distress. So, maybe we just need to redefine what pain is and just call it a distressful situation.
Yeah.
Get people to recognize that all of these things actually they all have the same origins. We just don't realize what those origins are because most people don't know what connective tissue is or how the autonomic nervous system operates, and they just don't have a keen understanding of pain. And what I can tell you from being a therapist is most people don't really care what caused them pain. They just want to know how to get out of it.
Yeah.
Knowing how you got into it is actually part of how you get out of it. That's my thought.
It's true. It's true. And, there's a lot of things that we do and a lot of things that we do that ends up keeping us in that pain state and in that chronic pain state. And I think a lot of times clients don't end up realizing that when, you kind of expand. And I know reading your book, you highlight this in your book where there's other components. There's a nutritional component. There's a psychological component, like especially when it relates to stress. Are you putting your body in unnecessary stress that's kind of keeping you in that chronic pain without knowing it? Examples like if you have back pain and you sit lots, those are probably two things that they don't help each other. They make each other worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you've talked about fascia and connective tissue. How does that piece fit in with the chronic pain?
Well, that's actually where, for me, when I was in my early 20s, my background was in neuromuscular therapy. I worked with Leon Chaitow and Judith Delaney Walker, and was at that point I thought I knew everything about the human body. I had a master's in physiology and anatomy. I was like the smart kid on the block in fitness. I was a presenter at a lot of national fitness conferences. And I was really always under the impression that if you exercised in a balanced way, if you pushed as much as you pulled, and those concepts, that you would actually improve your body's alignment, posture, function, and fitness. And I can tell you that it's the dirty little secret of fitness is that half the people in the fitness industry are injured. I mean, most of the professionals actually suffer from chronic pain. So my, issue was like, well, if we're teaching people what we know and we're in pain, could we be instilling the no pain, no gain theory? And sure enough, by the time I got into my late 20s, I suffered from chronic pain, and it was so debilitating for me. I was 26 years old and crawling to the bathroom in the middle of the night because I couldn't stand up on my foot. My back hurt me, my knee bothered me, my foot was just absolutely so inflamed. I couldn't, nothing worked. And I think that, I was probably also one of the ones that was in that idea that, okay, let me rest, let me just ease back something, let me take something away. But in doing that, it's also very psychologically disruptive. And when I went to find an answer for my own pain, and I went to doctors, I actually had a doctor say to me, "You know what, Sue, I think you're depressed." And I'm like, "No crap, I'm depressed. I can't move and I'm a professional in fitness. Of course I'm depressed. I can't, I'm in pain, fix this." And nothing worked. And so I really had to move out of fitness and out of these this traditional education to find an answer. And in trying to find an answer for my own pain, I stumbled upon this fascial research that was emerging over the past decade before that. And I had known, in schooling they mentioned fascia, but it was always like the stuff that you toss in the bucket to get to the good stuff. And nobody really made it sound like it was anything more than a passive packing material. And I never knew anything about it. And come to find, in my late 20s, I was introduced to Gil Hadley and Tom Findlay, and then, a few years later, Robert Schleip, and, Tom Myers, like all these guys in this, like late 90s, early 2000s. I was suddenly meeting these people saying, what is this that you're doing? Like, how can you say that, connective tissue is a relevant structure? It's just this. And they're like, no, it has active properties in it. Fibroblasts are cells just like any other cell. They're reactive. And I veered clear out of fitness and drank the Kool-Aid and said, how can I be so smart and know so little? And it really shifted how I started to understand the human body and how I understood pain. And today, I'm a founding member of the Fascial Research Society. We had our very first Fascial Research Congress in 2007. And now, if you Google fascia, you'll find hundreds of thousands of sites that cite fascia. But in 2000, when I was looking for it, there were 150 sites that mentioned it, and I looked at all 150 of them, and half of them didn't have anything to do with the human body at all. But what I can tell you is that science is starting to recognize that connective tissue under daily living, it creates cellular effect. Connective tissue is very reactive to tension and compression, and connective tissue, because it's a fluid-based matrix, is the supportive infrastructure. It's like flexible scaffolding under our skin, and we all understand fascia to support our bones and our muscles, but what's more compelling is that we're really starting to recognize that the majority of our sensory nerve endings live in the fascial tissue. And so when we feel pain, we're actually getting messages through those sensory nerve endings, and the environment that the sensory nerve endings live in, if it's not stable, can actually cause our sensory nervous system to become overstressed. It increases our pain reception, and it can actually cause us to have chronic pain. But it's not just, what we're finding is it's not just nociception, which is, pain reception through certain receptors in the body to the brain. But the biggest thing that we're starting to see is as our nervous system becomes more and more stressed, it exhausts our nervous system, and it starts to alter how our neurochemical systems operate. And it can throw our metabolic state off, it can change our hormones, and it really can ultimately accelerate our aging process. So we're now linking fascia and research in fascia to understand more about why pain becomes chronic, and can you deter pain in general, our sense of pain, by restoring the fluid state of our fascial system. And that's been my hypothesis since 2000, when I said, it's a fluid exchange, it's a hydration, and there was no evidence of this. And everybody's like, well, eventually we'll be able to test fascia. And in these last 5 years, we've actually found new tools beyond ultrasound to be able to test fascia, to be able to understand what is fascial stiffness, how do we define fascial stiffness, what is elasticity and the ability for fascia to return to its original state, and what alters that behavior, and how can we restore it from day to day so that we don't go down that road of having accumulated stress and ultimately damaging our nervous system's ability to operate efficiently. It's a big industry and it's very new. When you think about, research, it's, you're talking about something that's 15 years old. It's such a young industry.
Very cool. Very cool. And then, so, looking at how fascia and connective tissue play a big role in people's quality of life, chronic pain. Now, how does the self-care part play into it when it comes to, addressing connective tissue, fascia, and chronic pain?
Okay, so this is actually the most important thing for people to realize, is that what I said before is that what science is starting to recognize, and what I think most clinicians understand, is that daily living, every single day, daily living causes cellular dehydration in the connective tissue. And in fact, it's a natural cellular process that's happening to every single one of us every single day. And the bummer about it is that it doesn't matter if you eat right, or you exercise, or you're an athlete, or you're just a sedentary adult. Doesn't matter how old you are, or what your religious beliefs are, anything. None of these things matter when it comes to fascia, because it's a natural cellular process of dehydration that occurs from daily living. And so what we know now is, if you were to rely on somebody like me to work on your tissue, you would have to come to see me every single day. Yeah. And first of all, that costs a lot of money. Yeah. You have to find a great therapist who's willing to deal with you every day. And then it kind of, you're suddenly stuck by needing this other person to always help you. If you have a problem, it's almost like you're surrendering your power of that natural healing process. So with self-care, what we need to know is that, connective tissue is this adaptable, renewable resource in the body. And in fact, it's very reactive, just like tension. I said to you before, fascia is very reactive to tension and compression. So what we know is that if you compress or pull on tissue for long periods of time and you never let it go, that's the very thing that dehydrates it. However, we're also recognizing that if you apply, specific pressure in specific depths, and you create shear force to the fascia in local regions, that the very thing that can dehydrate it can in fact rehydrate the tissue. So Melt and what I've developed are self-care tools that are gentle. Anybody can do them. They're easy to do, and we make huge changes in under 10 minutes, which to me, I think is the biggest thing for people to realize, is that it's not something that you have to invest a lot of time or a lot of money in, but just as important is eating a healthy diet and drinking water frequently, that stimulating the connective tissue so that it doesn't go into that excessive dehydration state is actually easy to do, and it just takes a few minutes a day. It's not an investment of time or money. It's just about the know-how, and when you understand the why, the how, and the what of your connective tissue system, you'll care for it a whole lot more, and you'll realize that you feel better when you care for this system.
Awesome. Awesome.